Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. I always mumble those words. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a PhD student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plomp. I'm a bioarchaeologist who looks at health and disease and human evolution.
And Ross is away today, but in his place we have a special guest joining us from Belgrade.
Hey, my name is Marta, and I'm also a PhD student in archaeology.
And today we have a special Halloween episode. This is coming out on Halloween Day, October 31st, I believe. So we're watching an actual horror movie this time. We said we had a Halloween movie last time, but it was not very scary at all. This is an actual scary movie. We're talking about The Descent from 2005.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon Prime in Canada.
I actually found a couple of full versions on YouTube as well. As always, we like to start off with a summary of the movie. Marta, as our guest, would you like to summarize this movie?
All right, of course, why not? So, kind of a quick summary, I guess. We have this group of girls, women, 6 of them, I think, who I believe are big enthusiasts, like big outdoor kind of enthusiast people, right? And they're all like, hey, let's go and have adventures, right? And so one of the ways they like to have their adventures is they like to go explore caves. And they go on this big adventure together to explore a cave. But there's a whole background story of like their interpersonal relationship and dramas. And that was like the whole story opens up with a big like traumatic event that happened to one of the characters. I believe she's supposed to be the main character. And then they all go off together on an adventure of exploring this cave and exploring, you know, their own psyche and descending into caves and madness and everything that follows, right? So I guess that's kind of the gist of it. I don't know if I got everything.
We do allow spoilers on this.
Oh, you do allow spoilers? Okay,
yeah.
We're definitely going to spoil this one.
We spoil all the movies.
That's true. I thought maybe no spoilers right at the summary, but
This is a scientific show. It's like an academic paper. We put all the key findings in the abstract, and then you can sort out the details later.
Yeah, well, okay, so she's just this, you know, woman who loses her husband, I guess, and child in like a big car accident they get into, which I believe is caused by his, you know, absent-mindedness during driving because of different personal
He had his
things.
eyes off the road for
He had his eyes off
time.
the road, and I think he's had his eyes off the road because he was really lost in his thoughts, thinking about his mistress. So he dies, and their child dies, and she's obviously very traumatized. And then that's how the movie starts off, and that's where we understand that, you know, they're good friends, but obviously there's some drama there, there's cheating, there's, you know, you've got it all. And then, you know, the story jumps in time. I don't think we know how much in time, but it jumps a bit in time, right? And then
yeah, but it doesn't seem that long.
And yeah, not that long, but like sometimes. So you can kind of guess that it's been some time, but she's, you know, she's obviously still very traumatized and shaken up by everything. And her friends kind of want to connect with her again and, you know, make her, you know, feel good about life again. So they're like, let's go do our outdoor things again together. And that's how they end up exploring a cave, which they thought was going to be like an easy touristy cave that they're going to explore. But then it turns out it's not quite that, right? Because that friend of theirs who likes adventure, right? She was like, I'm not going to tell them, and we're just going to go descend into a completely unknown cave, which is something a, you know, experienced outdoor person who explores caves, that's something they would definitely do, put everyone at risk. Yeah.
Well, and then because she was keeping it a secret from everybody because she didn't want the friends to not want to go on this uncharted cave. And so the friend that reported to the authorities where they were going so that if they didn't show back up in 24 hours, they knew where to go look for them, gave the wrong cave. So nobody knew that they were there either.
Yeah, exactly.
I would seriously, if I survived this, I would charge her and sue her, and it would be so bad. I'd be so angry.
Yeah, that was one of the first big, what reactions I've had watching the movie was that moment in the caves when, she comes out saying that, they figure out that, because they know her well, and they know she's kind of like this, she's kind of arrogant, and she wants to, do her own thing, and I wanted to discover a new cave together and whatnot, right? And it's do you really want us to do it together, or is it for your own ego or whatever? But the moment when they realize she lied to them, and she lied to actual people who, emergency people who can help them if something goes wrong, to me it was they kind of brushed this off. They were like, I can't believe you. Okay, well, let's keep going. It was kind of too quick.
I guess you don't really have a choice at that point, but yeah, I know. They seem to be like, oh, Juno.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, good old Juno, always, taking us.
I'm going to eat you first.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, what I didn't get was, I'm not a caver at all, so I don't understand any of the want to do this. But even when they go into the cave and then they're like, oh, I'll just go see what's under this hole, and they keep going and they're crawling through this very narrow cavern, and they just they don't know if there's a exit. They don't know if they're going to have to turn around. They don't know if there's going to be room to turn around. They don't know how stable everything is. It was all insane to me. I thought they were insane.
Yeah. That part, yes, it's definitely insane, but I can't say I've not done that in caves.
Oh, gosh. I could never. You would never get me there.
Not quite that, but the moment when they first start crawling through that really, really tight space, my first thought was, I've done this at Mala Balanica, which is one of the caves where we excavate out. That's where Josh and I met. Because obviously when we do archaeological excavations of caves, you kind of always excavate very close to the entrance, right? That's where people lived. Nobody lived deep, deep down in the cave. That's what we're interested in. Obviously, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for some kind of cave art, for example, because we've definitely had experts come to Serbia and go around caves looking, at potential cave art, then you would go deeper. That's where you expect cave art, right? That's the front of the cave by the entrance. That's the space where they lived. And then deeper in, you would expect them to, maybe bury their dead or have cave art or things like that, right?
But is it, so in the places that there's usually cave art in a cave, is it areas that are difficult to access, or is there always a little bit of an ease to access? Because I can't see Pleistocene humans or Neanderthals caving in order to go paint something on the wall. So it would be something that could be fairly easy to get to, right?
Well, yeah.
At least at the time.
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on particular caves. I'm not sure. Josh, do you remember the examples of
Well, one of the things about the caves where we work is they were doing a survey of cave art because there is basically no cave art from the Paleolithic in Eastern Europe, or at least in the Central Balkans, which is in contrast to Western Europe where there's lots of cave art, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we can talk about in this movie because cave art comes up, but cave art is really particular to the culture that's making it, which is something that the movies don't really care about.
Yeah.
It's true.
Anyway, to finish up this summary of the movie, you're missing the big part that I'm interested in, is that there are sort of prehistoric caveman monsters that start to attack them.
Humanoids.
There's a lot of the reviews talk about how this would be a great scary movie just because of the fear of claustrophobia of being trapped in a cave, but then they throw monsters at you on top of it.
Well, my dad is visiting, so we watched it last night, and I didn't tell him what it was about. I just said I'm watching a horror movie for the podcast. And so we put it on and we're watching it. And he's like, he thought that the horror was getting lost in a cave by this asshole who took you in there, right? And then we put the subtitles on because I was having trouble hearing it. And so he's just watching it thinking that's a horror movie. And then when the subtitle says creature growling, and he was like, oh my God! What does that mean? What's in there? So I think it was almost better to not know that that's what was going to happen.
Yeah, but I also was reading up on some of the reviews a bit, and I saw that a lot of people were talking about the claustrophobia of it. That's the horror of the movie, not the monsters themselves, which I thought was really interesting because obviously, for me at least, I don't know about you, Josh, but watching that movie, like the claustrophobia part, like I just didn't get that at all. Because I'm so used to being in caves and working in caves.
The claustrophobia gets to me initially kind of every time, and then just very quickly it just normalizes and I just feel comfortable.
But I guess it would depend on if you've been caved in and you don't know there's another exit. That's a whole different level of claustrophobia,
That's true.
Right?
Maybe to keep this episode as scary as possible for Halloween, we can talk about our scariest experience in caves. But Kim, you say you've never actually excavated in a cave before?
No, I've just done like the touristy caves. So you guys tell.
Yeah.
Marta, what's the scariest thing that you've experienced in the caves where we work?
Well, that's the thing. Like, caves have been such a big part of my life, even before doing archaeology, right? Because I actually went to like a grammar school in Belgrade, which is right next to a big stadium. And underneath that stadium, there are kind of like tunnels that were dug up during World War II by the Germans here, like bunkers, basically, for, I don't know, some kind of whatever they were using them for, different maybe possibly military uses or whatever. But then those bunkers connect to a cave underneath that stadium, underneath that big hill that's right next to my school, my high school, which is not a full cave. It was discovered while they were mining the rocks from that place at a certain point. And after they built the stadium and everything, that's when they closed everything up, and that's when it became like a full-on cave. And being, high school students that we were, very curious and everything, we explored, and you could actually get in. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying this on the podcast, but yeah, you can get in, right? And we knew how to get in. A lot of people, when we started going there, not a lot of people knew about it, but soon enough, you could find many teenagers dwelling around the bunkers and the cave. So I spent a good majority of my high school days just sitting around in, like, a big break, like lunch break. You go and, we're like, oh, what are we going to do? Oh, let's go hang out in the cave. And then we like bring candles and go and listen to music and just sit there, right?
Cool.
And so, caves have always just been there for me. And for whatever reason, I've never found them scary at all. I find them actually quite pleasing and quite calming. But I remember when we started excavating in caves, you know how, caves are very damp, right? There's a lot of humidity in there. And the caves we were excavating, we didn't really have any running water in the caves, but definitely like the dampness and, the condensation from the roofs of the caves would, form little droplets that would sometimes drip. And I remember one time one of the colleagues that was excavating with us, she came out of the cave, she was like, I heard a little and she was so scared of that sound because she wasn't sure what that was. She was like, maybe it's a little animal, maybe it's something, I don't know. And then we figured out it was just the water dripping. But I remember she got really scared from that. And then that was like a thing, that whole like season, like we were just talking about that little sound coming from the caves. But actually this movie, has spoilers ahead again, has a second part, right? Which came out later, which is something we watched in the field together as like a team, as a crew of archaeologists. And I know that, after watching that movie, everybody was really scared of going into the cave. Especially because that was after we already experienced that whole dripping sound and everything. So all of that together.
So now you're just listening for that predator sound?
Yeah, exactly. Just waiting for the predators, definitely. But wow. I didn't quite pick up from the movie what those creatures are.
They mentioned something. They said, they must have been evolved for the darkness. So I presume that they were humans that got trapped in the cave and then just started living in there. And
so that's my guess. My guess is that they are like possibly, some of them people that were in that first, because we know when they start, like the cave collapses at some point, right? And they have to run through the cave and find an exit and things like that. And they notice, like, I don't know what that piece of equipment is called, but that little piece jammed up in the roof of the cave and they have to go.
Yeah. So they said that was 100 years old.
Yeah, it's 100 years old and whatnot. So maybe some of those creatures, are the people from that expedition or something like that.
Yeah, and then if that was the intent, then there's no way that there would be evolution to that extent in 100 years.
Exactly. So that was confusing to me. So if it's
then there was also human skeletons. So I kind of thought maybe the people from 100 years ago just got eaten.
Yeah, they just got eaten.
Well, the director has spoken about it in interviews, and they do very briefly explain it in the movie. So what they're intended to be is, we mentioned that there are some cave paintings which look suspiciously like Upper Paleolithic French cave paintings, which are, 20 to 30,000 years old. And so the director has said that the intention is that these were prehistoric cave people which evolved to live in the cave. So they would have been the descendants of the people who made the cave paintings, and they would have been evolving in the cave for tens of thousands of years.
Right.
But maybe this is a good point to transition into picking out the scientific inaccuracies. And this is not supposed to be an accurate scientific movie, but I still feel like I have a lot to talk about. Starting with the fact that it's set in the Appalachian Mountains, even though it looks suspiciously like Scotland, which is where it's actually filmed. Ross probably would have had something to say about that.
Yes.
But of course, there's really not enough time that humans have been living in North America to evolve so dramatically inside a cave. I think it's hard to speculate on how fast humans can evolve into something under unique conditions, but I don't think that we could see that much evolutionary change in humans over 30,000 years or less.
To the point that they're moving differently, they seem to be climbing on roofs, on the ceiling, and like maybe eyesight might get lost a bit, but
like everything else, like the physical appearance in itself, I think, and the climbing on the roof and everything, those are some some traits
and the weird predator noise that they make.
That's just something I don't think that would be an actual real chance of that evolving.
No, look at Gollum. He started as a hobbit and he was alone for eons, right?
Yeah, since
before Gandalf could remember, or Gandalf could remember, but nobody else could, right?
Yeah.
The eyesight bothered me the most because they were totally blind, right? But they still had eyes and they still blinked, right?
Yes.
And I think that this movie, like just a lot of people in general, just have real serious misunderstandings of how evolution works.
Yes.
I think this movie has a real Lamarckian view of like use it or lose it. So if they're not using their eyes and therefore they go blind, which doesn't really make sense. There'd be a lessening of the selective pressure to keep like good
strong
eyesight, but there isn't a selective pressure to actively lose their eyesight altogether, other than the fact that growing eyes developmentally would be expensive, like metabolically expensive to do that. But the real problem is that in the movie, and also according to the director, and just as a matter of practicality, they're not permanently living in the cave because they leave the cave to hunt.
I know, I was just going to bring that up. So even if they leave the cave at night to hunt, that's still far lighter and they're still going to need their eyesight, especially as a humanoid, right? Starting out. So if anything, their eyesight might become better because
night
they
vision
would need
at
to
least, right?
Yeah, they'd become nocturnal, not cave-only dwellers, right?
Yeah.
I think they might be modeling it a little bit on bats who use echolocation, but who allegedly have poor eyesight. But the problem with that is that bats don't have poor eyesight. They don't have good daylight color vision, but they probably have better night vision than humans do.
Yeah, it's just not what they rely on for.
And there are a lot of animals that have evolved sightlessness who do live in caves, but these are animals that live permanently in the cave with absolutely no light. And in that case, eyes are a liability because they're like an entry point into your body, so they can get infected and stuff like this. And so in that case, there would be a pressure to evolve to not have eyes, but it's not the eyesight that they're evolving not to have. It's the open hole on your body, which is a liability. And this came up a few times because more than once they killed one of these creatures by gouging their eyes out. Which is like, okay, so you evolved to be blind, but you still kept the liability of an open
soft
hole on your body? Like, just totally not understanding how evolution would actually work. So I can't believe that any human, no matter how long you lived in a cave, if you're going outside of the cave ever to get food, you wouldn't lose your eyesight completely. Like, you'd lose some color vision, but you'd probably gain dark vision, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, agreed. But they seem to not have any senses except for the echolocation, because there is a point when that creature, when they had figured out that it was movement and noise that attracted them. And so she came out of the water, Sarah came out of the water, and the main woman, and one of the things was coming, so she laid down flat on a rock just on the shore of the water and didn't move, but she was holding a torch with fire. And so that thing came and it's put its hand on her head.
Exactly, yeah, I was thinking
and
about
listened, and she didn't move, so it didn't hear her, so then it moved on. You're like, but it was sitting right beside the fire, like it would have felt the heat of the fire on its arm. It would have probably been at that, like, it sat there long enough, it would have started to get too hot. And you would have felt the different texture of her hair and her head and her body warmth. Like, it just didn't make sense. So it seems like they had lost all senses except for this echolocation.
Yeah.
But even with the blindness, to me, like, I don't feel like they were consistent with that as well, like, from the beginning. Because, like, the first scene where we actually see the creature, right? Sarah's, like, gone off to, like, explore a bit on her own, and she goes into this little tunnel. And she's pointing her flashlight, right? And she sees the creature. And the creature, like, looks up at her, right at the flashlight, and, like, runs away. Like, it
responds to the light like a rat or something would.
Right? So, like, that's what bothered me the most. Because, like, from the first scene that we see the creatures, like, they're supposed to be blind. But then the first thing the creature reacts to with them is the light from the flashlight. So...
Right, but then it can't see the fire or anything later.
Yeah.
Yeah, their senses seem to be, they change scene to scene depending on what they needed to happen in the scene.
Yeah.
Which this movie is pretty, I've watched a few reviews, and it's pretty highly regarded as a good horror movie.
Yeah.
And part of the problem here is that I don't like horror movies, so I'm not going to be great at reviewing it, but I thought this movie was not very good.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed it as a goofy horror movie, and it did get me a couple times, so... When I was drinking a glass of water, so I just had a glass of water in my hand, sitting on the couch, and that first time that they're in the, Sarah's seen the things a couple of times, but no one believes her. They think she's hallucinating because of the cave. And then when they turn on that light and the thing is behind her, I jumped up high enough that I spilt the water all over me on the couch. So it did get me. So to me, that's kind of all you need from a movie like this, right?
I was keeping a jump scare counter. There are 17 jump scares in this movie. That feels like too many.
Okay, well, it only got me once, so that's pretty good then.
It didn't actually get me too many times, because as soon as I was like, oh, we're like 15 minutes in and there's already 3 jump scares, I'm like, I'm going to start keeping a tally. And so I was basically like listening for watching for the formula as like, oh, there's a jump scare coming. And then I was like ready to write it down at the point where it came. So that's another thing. Like, I don't like jump scares. I feel like a good horror movie shouldn't use a lot of jump scares.
Yeah, I mean,
well, the good ones are more psychological, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once I started like really paying attention, like, oh, there's going to be a jump scare every 5 minutes, then I could just read the formula and like know exactly when it was coming. So I expected I was going to be scared and not like this movie because I don't like scary movies, but I ended up not being very scared. Another thing is that they show the monsters way too much, right?
Yes, it would be scarier if it was more of an unknown.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I think they're relying on this early 2000s aesthetic where, like The Ring, where the horror comes from gruesome, distorted human bodies, which seem to come and pass relatively quickly. And I think this falls right in the middle of that.
Yeah. They also seem relatively easy to kill, like in the way that most like thriller horror movies are. You have the heroes and they can each take down 4 to 6 of these things at a time. Right?
Yeah, I have written down here that this movie doesn't really understand how death and injury work.
Yes, yeah.
They gouge out one of its eyes and now it's dead. Like, you don't die when your eyes are gouged out. In fact, they don't see. So like when you gouge out a human's eyes, part of the big problem is that they're incapacitated because they can't see you.
Yeah.
This one would be in a lot of pain, but it would be running around.
It would just be more angry, yeah.
Yeah.
Whilst Becca got stabbed through her throat, and she survived for the majority of the movie and talked, had a very lighthearted chat with Sarah.
Exactly, and that's a big point too, is that it was actually Juno So Juno was fighting one of these things with these ice axes that they have. And then her friend, it was kind of her friend's fault. You don't walk up to somebody fighting for their life with an ice axe like that. And she walked up to her and like tapped her on the shoulder. And so Juno turned around and stabbed her in the neck with it. And it was an accident. But then she left her. She left her as she was pleading, don't leave me. And Juno was like, I'm out. Yep. That was bad.
Outsies. No, to me, this whole movie, I feel like, I mean, yeah, I've also read some reviews and I've seen that people do regard it as like a good horror movie. But to me, it's just like this, I mean, it's very predictable. It's like this horror movie formula. Like even the characters, you have Holly. It was obvious she was going to die first. She's like, the daredevil of the group, right?
Yeah.
And she doesn't care. And then Juno's like the badass.
She saw some kind of light and she just ran straight for it, like without taking any consideration of where she was going or what she was walking on or anything.
Yeah. And she's supposed to be like, that's something that also bothered me a lot. It's like they're supposed to be experienced with this and they act like they have like they're in the cave for the first time in their life. Like, just like running after sounds and lights and, not being cautious at all. And just, so yeah, you've got Holly who obviously is going to die first and she's like, careless. And then you have Juno, is it? She's like, I'm really bad with names, but yeah, so she's
the villain is Juno.
Yeah, and they did everything to make her a villain, right? She, cheated on, I mean,
she was the mistress.
Yeah, she's the
Sarah's
mistress,
husband.
right, of her best friends or whatever husband, and she's like, she leaves people dying, killing people, like she's just like this villain, right? Then you have Sarah, who's like this protagonist in a good way, and she's all, she's been through this trauma and then she transforms herself through the whole ordeal, right? And becomes, the whole new...
tough again.
Yeah.
But so what happens with Holly is that then Sarah finds Holly and Holly's not dead yet. She's gurgling because she's got a hole in her throat. And then Holly warns Sarah that Juno did that to her and then left her. And so she said, don't trust her. And then Sarah was like, well, no, we have to trust her. And then Holly told Sarah about the affair, which I don't know. Like, maybe I'm heartless, but in that situation, I don't care who my husband had sex with.
Yeah,
I don't care. There are monsters chasing us in a cave.
Yeah.
He could go and have sex with whoever he wants. I don't care at this point. Like, I don't know. There's a difference in that. But
And she was like, oh, she left you for dead? Yeah, I don't know. She slept with my husband? Okay, she's definitely, that bitch, like...
Yeah.
I kind of thought that she wasn't so concerned about her husband, but she was really concerned about her daughter dying because throughout the movie, she keeps having these hallucinations about her daughter with a birthday cake because it would have been her daughter's birthday like a week or so after they died, right? A week or so after the husband and the daughter died. And so she wasn't so much grieving for her husband as she was grieving for her daughter, but her husband was distracted because he was having the affair, and that's what got the daughter killed. So I interpreted that it wasn't so much about the husband, but it was about losing her daughter that she was upset.
But even then, that's a lot of processing to do in that situation, right?
Yeah. Anyway, also with Beth dying, as you say, Marta, she got stabbed in the neck.
That was Holly.
And then instantly incapacitated.
Sorry, that was Beth. Yeah.
Yeah. Beth was stabbed in the neck and then instantly incapacitated. She drops to the ground and then lies there, does nothing for a half an hour until Sarah finds her again when she's still alive and able to talk, but not able to move her hands or legs. And like, this is not how you die from a throat wound. You bleed to death, but your arms and legs still work until your brain dies from lack of oxygen. So like,
I assumed that the things had maybe ripped her apart a bit. Because they seem to be doing that, like attacking the intestines and then leaving them.
But when Juno actually stabbed her in the neck, she just dropped to her knees and lied on the ground like she was dead.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, I mean, just like no understanding of how death or injury works in this movie at all. It's like one thing immediately incapacitates you, but you can still live for as long as the plot needs you to be alive.
Yes.
I mean, they could have solved that easily by, just having Juno stab her anywhere else, right? But they wanted that dramatic effect of her in front of her, like with her throat cut open and whatnot. Which, okay, understandable, because as you said, the movie is definitely playing on that like whole gore thing, right? But they definitely didn't think that through all the way.
Let's talk about the cave paintings, because this is something that one of the few things that really directly relates to the theme of our podcast. So at some point in about the middle of the movie, they find these cave paintings, and
yeah, and it's when they're lost and kind of giving up hope that they're going to find a second exit, right? Entrance.
Yeah. And they're mostly not interested, except that one of them finds out that the cave paintings include a drawing of the mountain with 2 entrances, and from that they deduce there's 2 entrances to this cave, and therefore we don't have to give up hope.
Or at least there was 30,000 years ago.
Right. I felt like it was such a stretch to look at 3 triangles and say, this indicates that there's another exit and we can get out. But the rest of the cave paintings, are animals, and I noticed that they're directly inspired by both Lascaux and Chauvet caves. Mm-hmm. So there's 3 animals in the paintings. There's cave rhinos, horses, and Megaloceros, the giant elk. And the giant elk, the way the antlers are drawn are really distinctive, and they look exactly like the giant elk paintings at Lascaux. Did you guys notice these details?
Not in that detail. I know that they look the same, but I wouldn't say the antlers look this. That I don't know well enough, yeah. It's also the same as the elk that they found outside before they went into the cave, right?
That's true, but it's not the same elk, because that was an American elk, but the Irish elk or giant elk or whatever they call it. It has a few names.
Oh, I think yes, with those moose like antlers. Yes, yeah. Ross has a head of one in his house.
In his house? I wouldn't even fit one of those in my house.
Oh, I think, or maybe it's a replica. It must be a replica. I don't know. He has something like that.
There's a lot of them in Europe. I think it's the museum in Negotin, Marta, that has a set of those. Do you know the museum I'm talking about? There's probably a few museums in Serbia that
probably.
have,
I'm not sure. But to me, you asked if we know. I didn't pay attention to those details, because to me, the second they started talking about there's 2 entrances because we saw these cave paintings or whatever. To me, first thing that really occupied my mind with that was that's kind of the whole narrative of archaeology and pop culture in general, in movies and video games like Indiana Jones and Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. There's always this idea that, you're on this adventure, this quest to go through this maze, ancient maze, and then everything you see there is just a clue for you to find your way around. Yeah. That just fit perfectly into that narrative. And that's the thing that, drew my attention the most. So I didn't really, pay close attention to the actual depictions.
Well, I did, because that's the whole reason I started this podcast. Yeah, one of the things about, like you say, it's the cave painting only makes sense if you're looking at through the lens that it only exists as a clue for the people who are there in this moment. And one of the reasons why it looks so weird to me is that the cave paintings, the Upper Paleolithic cave paintings, are almost all animals with some people and some geometric shapes, but almost none of them have any landscapes or anything like that. So to see the paintings from Lascaux and Chauvet combined with a painting of a cave and a mountain, it looked so foreign.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Is that they tried to do what they thought would be one that would work. Yeah.
Anyway, the giant elk only lived in Europe and possibly Asia, I'm not sure, but it didn't live in North America. And also the woolly rhinos that are in the paintings there also never lived in North America. So add to the fact that humans who made those style of cave paintings only ever lived in Western Europe and not in North America. The animals that are drawn there only existed in Europe and Asia and not North America. And the whole concept, it was filmed in Scotland and starred British people. Why didn't they just set it in Britain? It would have made so much more sense.
Yeah. I thought it was set in Britain, and my dad pointed out the Colorado license plate on the car.
Yeah, that's what what I was thinking about, because at first I thought, obviously it would be set somewhere in Britain. And then I still couldn't quite figure out throughout the movie why it's set in North Carolina, is it?
I know, since the landscape was Scotland.
Yeah, exactly.
I
don't
know.
I don't know. Because they like to travel.
Maybe just to appeal to American audiences.
Yeah, I mean, we found that multiple times with the Neanderthal movies. A lot of times they're set in the U.S. and you're like, well, Okay.
Another thing is there's two different movies. There's two different endings, an American ending and a European ending. Do you guys know which ending you watched?
I watched the brutal ending. It was, okay, I'll go over the ending. I thought it was a bit far. Like, I would be mad and I would sue Juno. But, so the ending that I saw was that after everything, only Juno and Sarah were the survivors, which was pretty, like, you saw that coming.
Yeah.
And then, they were about to leave the cave, and, like, things were coming, and Sarah showed Juno the proof, like, the keychain that her husband had given her, so the proof that I know both that you killed Beth and left her for dead, and I also know that you were sleeping with my husband. And so instead of dealing with this outside the cave later, she takes her axe and puts it through Juno's knee. So again, not even killing Juno, like not even angry and I don't like you, you're not getting out of this cave, so I'm going to kill you. She makes it so she can't walk. So she injures her and then leaves her for dead for the things to eat her.
Yeah.
Like that's some heavy spite right there. And like, yes, I would be mad at Juno too, but I don't know that I could do that. Like if anything, my anger would have me kill her, but not, I don't know. That just seems more brutal to leave her for dead to fight off. Because at the end, she got eaten by like 6 or 7 of them, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is the same in both endings. So what happens after that in the version you saw? The endings are the same, but one of them just goes on for like 2 minutes longer and changes it.
I think that's.
I think then that's probably the one I watched because it kind of got silly. So the one that I watched. So Sarah gets in the truck, drives far, like you would, and then finally when she feels safe far enough, she stops and she cries and throws up and all that, does that stuff. And in the very last moment, there's this image where she sees Juno's ghost beside her in the car.
Yeah.
And that's the end?
Yeah.
Oh, no. That wasn't the end for me, though.
That's not the end?
That's the American happy ending.
That's why. Jesus. That's why I thought, like, for the entire movie, like, for me, the ending that I saw kind of made it a bit better. Because then it's like, that's what I said in the beginning, like this descent into caves and into madness, right? Because in my ending, yes, she sees her ghost. And that's what prompts her to wake up. And she didn't actually leave the cave. So she's still in the cave. She's just waking up from getting unconscious. She just like wakes up with this deranged look on her face. Like, you can see she's gone completely mental. And she sees that image that she keeps seeing throughout. And with that ending, it kind of makes sense, those like shots of her seeing her daughter in front of the birthday cake, right? Because she sees that again. She sees her daughter in front of a birthday cake, but then I think that was a good moment. Like, that was the best moment in the movie. They panned the camera from the little girl in front of the cake. And in every image, in the movie before that, her daughter is sitting in front of that cake in this kind of dim lighting, right? Like this kind of yellowish dim lighting. And in that final scene, the camera pans and you can see that light is actually from the fire, the fire that she's holding in the cave.
Yeah.
She's just like standing opposite of her daughter. And then there's no daughter, there's nothing. She's just her with the fire alone in the cave with the deranged look on her face. And camera just pans out. And that's the end. I loved that.
So that's a better ending.
That's a good ending. And it kind of insinuates that, maybe she's just not going to leave that cave, right? She's going to stay there and...
except for that there's a descent too.
Right, which I've seen, but I don't remember most of it. Like, it's a very similar premise, but I don't remember if she's part of the descent too or not.
I didn't watch number 2, but I just read the sentence that Prime gives you, and it's her. So it's like when she gets out of the cave, it picks up. This is what it seemed like.
Right.
So I don't know how
she just goes crazy in the cave and then leaves the cave.
I haven't seen the second one, but it's definitely based on the American ending. So if you're watching the second one, the American ending is canonical, which is unfortunate because the European ending is much better.
I love it so much. Because with this ending, it just makes sense that she doesn't leave the cave. She stays there. She goes mad. And, maybe eventually becomes one of those creatures, whatever. I don't know what their, we already established that their evolutionary timeline is all messed up, right? But that, to me, that ending just made it, it was a goofy, silly, very, very formulated horror movie. But I did not expect that plot twist in the end, exactly because it was such a formulated horror movie all throughout. And then when it did happen, again, it's nothing revolutionary, But I was like, oh, okay, I like this. This made it kind of, I'm glad I watched this,
Right. Whereas the ending I saw was kind of formulaic.
Yeah, exactly.
With the ghost, it left it open to another jump scare.
Yeah.
And then 2, it left it open for a potential sequel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know. And it's interesting that we both didn't know. We both just so different. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the echolocation. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, if they were actually using echolocation, they would have heard their breathing too, right? And even their blood. Like, they would be able to, it wouldn't just be a stop moving, right?
They should just have better hearing in general if they only can sense through hearing.
Right. And then it doesn't make sense for them, again, if they're leaving, from what it looked like, they were leaving to go outside to hunt at night, or you assume at night, large animals. And I don't think echolocation would ever involve in that, because you don't need it most, if they started out as a hominoid that could see, then they just keep that as their method of locating prey at nighttime. So it would only that would work, hypothetically, even with, with a fake evolutionary scenario, would only work if they only hunted in the cave. And then that being said, that couldn't exist, because then it's not 1 or 2 of them. It is a large population of them, because they keep coming. So it's a large population of them. It's going to take quite a bit of food to keep that population going. And then even then, we only see one of them that seems to be female, whereas the rest look male. Right? And it was obvious when the female came on that she was female.
It was obvious that she was female because all of them are totally hairless, but the female has long hair. What the fuck was that?
And she had breasts too.
Sure.
So it's very obvious. So it's not that there's a lack of sexual dimorphism that we can't, we don't know what the sexes look like. So there is females. So that means the majority that we're seeing are males, which gives you this idea that there is females and children that we're not seeing.
Why not? Is it only the men that are hunting?
That are men that are hunting, and there's a lot of them, and they just keep coming out of nowhere. So it must be a huge community, a huge population. So the amount of hunting that they would need to be doing to feed that population would not be the once in 100 years humans that they're getting into, or whatever animals accidentally wandering far enough for them to get, or anything like that. Like, they couldn't survive like Gollum. Right? Because it's too big of a population.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think they would have evolved echolocation.
Yeah.
Well, notwithstanding the strange patriarchal gender roles of the actual creatures themselves, I think this is the first movie we've ever reviewed that actually passes the Bechdel test.
Yes, I thought that too. Yeah.
Because all of the human cast, I mean, as a biologist, as an anthropologist, I'm going to say that the creatures are humans. We're going to call them a species of humans. So everybody's human in this movie. But the regular non-cave humans, all of them are female except for the husband. He's the only male character in the movie, and he's only in the movie for about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And he doesn't say much.
He doesn't say much. And so, yeah, this movie is all women characters, and they're not only talking about men. They're mostly talking about each other, and they're talking about, I mean, a lot of it is centered around cheating with a man, but as I said, more of the emotional conceit of it is regarding her daughter rather than her husband.
Yeah, and there was 2 of them that were a couple, were they not? Or did I just read into that?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Like in the beginning, the one
they seemed coupley,
first.
And then one of them kept saying "baby, baby" to her in the cave.
I think so.
That's a nice little touch. I didn't even notice it for 2005. Just sort of to slip that in under the radar.
Yeah, and not even making it a big plot or like a big plot point, which I appreciated. It was just normal.
Yeah,
which I liked. Yeah,
and then the director has also said originally they were going to make all of the creatures male, and then they realized that doesn't make sense because there has to be a breeding population, so there have to be women and children. So the fact that there's only one woman and one child seems bad, but in the end it's actually, they added this to make it better. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you could definitely see, like, my feel throughout the movie was there's definitely this, there's this willingness to kind of make it, kind of like empowering for women, whole women's crew, and obviously passing the Bechdel test.
And they kick ass for the most part, yeah.
Yeah. So there was definitely like an effort on the part of filmmakers to kind of make it, empowering in a way. Definitely kind of a sloppy attempt, but an attempt regardless, which, you can't say that for a lot of movies. Even today. Yeah. No? So I think that's a plus for this movie.
Yeah.
Going back to the echolocation, I actually really liked the echolocation because, it wouldn't help hunting outside. So they shouldn't have lost their eyesight completely, but eyesight wouldn't help them if they're living deep inside a cave without fire because, Marta, when you get, 20 meters into a cave, you get a pitch blackness that you can't really get anywhere else.
Oh, I love that. That's one of my favorite things about caves. Just a little side.
I'd like that.
Just a little side note, but that's
it's like a sensory deprivation.
Yeah,
tank,
exactly.
Right?
If you just spend, it doesn't take a long time actually, but if you just, that's what I used to love to do. In that cave we were excavating it, I would crawl through a little tunnel to the next little chamber of the cave that we weren't excavating at that chamber at all. But actually, not us, but they did open up a few, I think, trenches in the other chamber, Josh.
Recently?
Not recently,
during the COVID times?
No. I said before we even excavated there. They had some test trenches in there, but it was just sometimes, if I feel overwhelmed by life, just crawl through the little tunnel like they did in the movie and just sit in the other chamber and turn off the light. And literally after a few minutes, you already can't tell the difference between your eyes being open and closed. And that's really cool to me. The fact that can happen.
I would just start to feel things crawling on me and I'd start to hear weird things and I would be probably hallucinating within seconds.
One year we did a test pit in that new cave, Marta. I think you didn't go to the cave, but Shuplia Dubka.
Yeah, I didn't go there.
So this cave, it was in the vicinity of the other caves, but it was more of a hike to get there. We had to basically climb up a little bit of a mountain. And then, as Marta said, normally we dig in the front of caves because that's where people lived, because you can't light a fire in the back of the cave or else you'll smoke yourself out. Oh, Smoke out. We were just talking about getting smoked out in the last episode with Ross.
Sure. Yeah, you used it naturally.
It's a real term that really exists that people use. Wasn't invented by George Bush. So we had to hike up here, and then instead of digging in the front of this cave, we were actually digging a test pit all the way in the back of this cave. And because it was a test pit, we didn't have a full team. So there was only 3 of us. And so one person was digging, and the cave is about 50 or 60 meters deep. So in the back of the cave, there's absolutely no light. And we had to go through a small little tunnel into a side chamber all the way at the back. We were digging a 2 meter by 2 meter trench as a test pit. And so one person would dig. One person would be sifting what was dug outside of the cave, and the third person was running buckets back and forth. And so for the person who was digging, most of the day was in total silence in a tiny chamber all the way in the back of the cave with a headlamp and one other LED lamp. And we had music playing on a speaker, which is what saved us. But there's a couple of times where it's so dark, even with the lights, you can't see everything around you all the time. Once in a while, you hear that sound, like maybe it's water dripping off the roof, like Marta said, like...
or something licking its lips.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something licking its lips, and it's like it's coming from a pile of rocks against the wall, and you're like, what's in this pile of rocks? It's not a flat floor. I see spaces between the rocks. Is there a snake in there? Is there a badger hiding under there? Is it a monster?
An evolved human. Yeah. I know. It's funny how there's so many times in life where I'm like, I'm a scientist. Like,
and in other years, we had real problems with poisonous snakes too. We had, remember Marta, I think it was 2019?
I think that's a real, actual scary experience I've had in a cave. Again, this is one of the caves that we, regularly excavate, and it's near the entrance. It's nothing scary like that. But so, again, 3 of us, Josh, I, and another friend, we were, opening up the cave for that season. And we've been excavating the cave for quite some time, so the trench goes really deep. And I start climbing in, and I'm like, la, 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 la. And I notice a snake, and I'm like, oh, look, a snake, how cute. And that other friend is like, that's the poisonous one, get out, get out. It was literally, I stepped this close to it, literally. Like this close, like 10 centimeters. Can I speak in centimeters? And like, literally, I just like ran out of the trench. And we actually spent the whole day, around 5 or 6 working hours, excavating in another part of the cave, in another trench, with the snake 5 meters away from us, just like curled up in there, probably afraid of us as much as we were of it, but regardless. And in the end, we managed to kind of scare it away. You know, we put like a branch, like a tree branch, so it can climb out on its own. And we just started making noise, like clapping and, you know, stomping our feet. And at some point, that friend and I, we started singing very, very, funny songs from the Serbian context. Like the national anthem and things like that. And the snake did leave eventually. But that was the actual, like, I wasn't that scared as much as it was like a realistically dangerous situation. And that whole season, I think that was 2019, that whole field season, there were just, for some reason, like that mating season, there were just so many of those poisonous snakes. And we saw a couple of them later as well around the caves. So that was quite an experience altogether, definitely.
It almost feels safer when you see them because they can slip into a crack in the cave wall and you never know when they're going to come back. They could just pop out of anywhere. So if they're sitting there quietly, then you can... There was one sitting beside the path for 3 days. So we just put a flag beside it to be like, don't step on the snake. But then when they disappear, you're like, I don't know where it is. It can pop out from any crack in the wall at any point.
And Ljubica had like a very close encounter with one because the 2 caves that we're excavating are really close to each other. And to get from one to the other, you just have to climb down a rock next to a rock that's like this close to you when you walk past it. And one of those snakes was on the rock as she was walking past. Do you remember that, Josh?
Yeah.
And she just like stood there. She's like, what do I do? Like this close, like, you know, very close. And it was, what do I do? It was just like, back up. Just like, you know, it's definitely, I mean, there is definitely an adventurous aspect to being an archaeologist. It is scientific, but there's definitely risk and adventure in it, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. As a Canadian who is taught how to deal with snakes, especially rattlesnakes, if you hear them rattle, I think it's that you stop, you take 3 slow steps away, and then run. But you don't run right away, because then you'll startle the snake. And
you saw, and then the snake's actually...
So 3 slow steps, and then go.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'll remember that for next time I encounter a snake in the field. Yeah.
Anyway, back to what's the word? Echolocation.
Echolocation. Yeah.
I actually like that because have you heard of actual living people who either can learn or spontaneously learned echolocation if they were blind from birth? It's a real thing that humans can do, and it's actually not that hard to learn.
I didn't know that. Okay.
There's basically there are some places where they offer to teach it. There's some people that are studying it, but apparently they say that any human could learn echolocation. You can learn the basics of it in a matter of hours, and in about 10 weeks, you can be pretty proficient in navigating with echolocation. Not as well as these creatures, but like if you were in a cave, you could echolocate and walk around the cave without stumbling or hitting a wall or something like that.
So I could, if I taught myself, I could find out where my pet rat is hiding.
I want to learn that. That sounds so cool.
And I think that realistically, if humans, for some reason, lived in a really dark cave, like here, the strange thing is that they couldn't have been trapped in the cave because they had to be able to get out to get food. So it's not like they were permanently trapped in the cave. No.
And there was evidence that they were going, because at that entrance, it was covered in animal bones.
Right. And if you can leave the cave, then you would never, as a human, choose to live in a cave for thousands of generations so that you lose your eyesight. It just doesn't make any sense. But if a human wanted to, or had an environmental, a selective pressure that, you know, if there was something in the cave that could help them thrive better than outside of the cave, certainly you could use echolocation in a cave, and over generations, if there was some, like, the problem is that there has to be something better inside the cave than outside of the cave for you to evolve that way, right?
I guess it could have been that they could have been trapped in the cave for enough generations that they evolved and changed and then found an opening.
Yeah, but like the problem is sustaining a breeding population.
Yes,
where would they be getting their food?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think in general, in terms of population size, there's a lot of like uncertainty about what size of like a minimal breeding population you'd need for humans to actually survive. But I don't think that they have anywhere close to that in this cave. And considering it, they seem to only live in this cave and no other caves. It's not like they're trading members of their gene pool with another community somewhere else.
Well, I mean, there was at least 50, I would say minimum 50. And that's if you're not assuming that there's equal amount of women and children somewhere.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe I'll try and find some papers to add in the show notes, but I don't think that any studies have suggested that something as small as a population of 50 is a viable gene pool.
No,
I think that would lead to extinction in a small number of generations, even if they did have food.
Definitely not enough variation for natural selection to make it so you can adapt to an environment like that.
Well, we're coming up on an hour here. Do we have any notes that we really wanted to...
No, Ross is the good note taker. I mostly just try and feel the movie, live it.
I have many notes.
Oh, do you?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I'm a note taker as well. But we've been through quite a few of them, actually, so far.
The only one I would say is that, you know, they were so heroic, always trying to save their friends and not wanting to leave their friends behind and stuff. Except for that one friend that said something like, when the two of them were hiding, I think it was the couple that was hiding, and they said, well, she's screaming so much she's going to bring them all down on her head. And the other one was like, well, as long as it's not on my head.
Yeah. And didn't she, like, I didn't quite understand that scene where, you know, when she dies, that character, if she was trying to leave the other two behind. She's running away.
I don't know. I think at some point she just didn't care.
Yeah. I think
I don't think I would either. I love my friends, but there's a certain point when there's monsters after you that you would just leave.
I guess so, yeah.
I'll meet you back at the hotel.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not a terrible friend, but...
And maybe this is far-fetched, but I instantly, in my head, I connected it to that moment when Sarah kills one of the monsters with a bone. I'm not sure.
Oh, the antler?
I thought.
No, there's two. There's one where there was an eye gouging kill with an antler.
Yeah, with an antler, and the other one was with was it a femur or tibia?
Yeah.
Which one?
I don't know. It was one or the other.
One or the other. I wasn't sure, but for some reason, that moment, the way she grabbed it and the way how she did it, like really reminded me of monkeys in Space Odyssey, of the primates in Space Odyssey, and the bone scene. I don't know why, but it really did. And like I said, maybe it's far-fetched, but it'd be interesting if that was that kind of association in the head of a director at that moment, because it was so like the camera and everything. It was so similar to that scene. I don't know.
They could have been paying homage to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if that was real, because I think that the imagery in the end there is supposed to be that she's like de-evolving into a more primitive state. So it seems realistic. It seems like the director would have made that choice to use that imagery specifically, because it's exactly the opposite of what's happening in the 2001 scene, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And what was when Holly was running after the light, and it turned out it wasn't light. She said it was some kind of phosphorus on the rocks or something. What was that about? I don't know anything about any phosphorus on a rock that would make daylight in a cave.
No, and I don't know, why she assumed that. I guess, she said that they're too far down, but they didn't seem to climb up to get to where they did find the hole.
Yeah, exactly.
With the daylight.
They said that she said that they were 2 miles down, but they didn't travel 2 miles down into the earth.
How much is 2 miles again?
Way. 2 miles is like 3 kilometers.
Okay, there's no way they traveled down 3 kilometers.
Yeah.
No, and then it wasn't very long until they were there was no going uphill. They were just running through the caverns flat, then found the small hill up to the hole, right?
I looked up the phosphorescent thing a little bit, and I mean, there are phosphorescent glowworms that can exist in caves, and they must have been drawing inspiration from that. She said that it was like the phosphorus mineral in the rock.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find anything that suggested that, except there's apparently some phosphorescent rocks you can mine in Minecraft, but I couldn't find any sources really talking about phosphorescent glowing rocks in caves in real life.
Exactly, yeah.
So if any of our listeners are cavers and have seen that, right?
Yes, please. I would love to know about that.
And the phosphorescent worms that exist do glow, but the glow is so dim that in order to get photos of it, you have to do a long exposure. And if you had headlamps on, you'd just never see that glow. It wouldn't be bright enough. So I don't think that was remotely realistic. They really glossed over it real quick, too. It's just really a convenient plot device that they immediately forgot about because, like, I'd be like, well, why don't we go to that chamber with the glowing rocks? Because then at least we can, turn off our batteries and not waste our time.
Yeah, exactly.
But no.
Especially because Juno mentioned it.
We know what it is without looking at it. They didn't even go and check and make sure it was phosphorus and not daylight. It's like, we know what it is without going there. We never have to go to that room in this movie.
Especially after Juno pointed out that like our light is going to run out eventually. We have to focus and whatnot, and then just disregard the source of light. Like that's really a big plot hole. And do we know in the end how do you give a lemon an orgasm?
Yeah, you stroke its citrus. Oh, is that what it is?
That was the worst joke I've ever heard.
That's so bad.
My dad asked me, he's like, "What'd she say?" And I was like, "I don't know." I'm not repeating that.
Terrible.
Yeah. Terrible. Yeah.
Maybe that was part of the reason why she left her for dead.
Maybe.
So how do we wrap up this movie then? We've done enough movies by now that we can't really all put them on a single tier list anymore.
Yeah, no. It was enjoyable. It's a good Halloween movie. Don't try and learn evolution from it or caving.
Exactly. Definitely not. No. Yeah. And watch the European version of like the European ending because I think that it makes it 10 times better.
Watch the European ending.
Yeah.
Definitely. Marta, you don't particularly like scary movies, do you?
No, not at all. I don't get scared.
Sorry that we invited you for this one then.
Yeah. Well,
Marta chose this movie off the list. So.
Yeah. Well, because it's caves and I love caves and I've seen the second movie, although I don't quite remember it very well, but I thought it was a good that would be a good topic to talk about, mostly because of caves. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the ending made it a worthwhile movie for me, definitely. I mean, I do like I don't like the horror genre in general, because I don't get scared usually. And so it's usually just predictable and boring to me. But I am always on the lookout. Like, I really want to find like a good horror movie that's going to scare me. This one didn't scare me, but you know,
for me, it's mostly ghost stuff that scares me.
Oh, yeah, me too, I think. But regardless, I did find it enjoyable because of caves, and although there's many plot holes that were already pointed out here, I still do think, it's a movie that kind of does draw you in, and especially, if you're not somebody who spends time in caves, like, it's interesting that it's set in a cave, I think. So overall,
I wasn't hoping that it was going to be over soon. Like, it wasn't one of those movies where you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, no. It was definitely interesting. It was, fun to watch, definitely. So.
Well, thanks for joining us, Marta.
Of course, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
I think it's going to be a really good episode with your experience in caves.
All right. Well, thank you. I had a lot of fun talking to you guys.
Normally, I'd ask a guest to share their social media and all that kind of stuff, but I know that you don't have any social media. Nope. So do you have any anything that you'd want to share? Any links to any projects you're working on?
Well, not really. I'm not working on any projects right now. I will point out that I am part of not really a project, but a crew of students of archaeology and anthropology here in Belgrade. And we do have our own podcast talking about like pseudo-archaeology. And we usually invite guests that are people from the archaeological community and anthropology, art history, even historians. And we talk about different topics that are, relevant currently in Serbia and in Belgrade regarding archaeology and pseudo-archaeology. It's interesting, but we do record it in Serbian. So for any non-Serbian listeners of this podcast, it's not going to be much. But I am hoping that at some point we can start shooting some episodes that could be in English as well. We'll see. But for now, it's only in Serbian. But it's a cool thing we're doing.
Very cool. What's the name of it?
It's called Reakcionizam.
Oh, we lost her. I'll put in a plug-in for mine. I just got a new webpage, drkimberlyplomp.com. So drkimberlyplomp.com.
Cool. Actually, we should probably share our own social media, which we literally never do. So we're on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast.
We are on Facebook at Screens of the Stone Age Podcast.
And we always say our website at the end of the episode, I think. And also we have an email, which is just screensofthestonage@gmail.com. And
we have a letterbox profile where you can look at our list of movies that we are hoping to watch. So if you have a request, you can email us and let us know, or tweet us, or Facebook us.
I should start adding all these things to the show notes so that people can actually get in touch with us.
We lost you, Marta. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Reakcionizam. So,
okay.
Should I spell it out?
That's okay. We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Very cool.
According to our analytics, we've got some listeners in Croatia and I think Romania. If any of them Croatians should understand Serbian well enough. Possibly someone in Romania might know Serbian, so there might be a few people listening. Plus, you'll share this with everybody you know in Serbia, in archaeology, Marta, and have them listen.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks to David Bach for designing our cover art. You can see more of his work at dkbach.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out what Canadian paleoanthropologists are working on at pasc-scpa.ca.